The issue of wondering whether clown slapsticks and act and comedy belong to rituals rather than any other form of cultural performance. And secondly, the part played by fire and by water in the slapstick is quite stunning. And if there is any merit that I can claim for this talk, is that it's an ethnography of clown act, a very small part of it, but with respect to water and fire. It could be claimed. I will read a few words to me just to anchor me in a text rather than performing or enacting an act. It could be claimed that the circus has no history. Naturally, of course, the various forms the institution of the circus have taken can be retraced through historical time. But as a traditional art, it is made up of skills which cannot change over time in any fundamental ways. Juggling is constrained by some physical laws. You can improve, you can vary the object you're juggling with, but basically you cannot have a history of juggling unless you have simply chronicle of the jugglers. And it exists, but it is very repetitive and it's always the same story. And when you go to a circus and you see jugglers, they always juggle. Now, you cannot have a historical perspective on that, but you can have an archaeological perspective, because in the archaeological record you can find objects with which jugglers in the past were juggling. And this, of course, is a cultural variance which is not uninteresting, but juggling, and it is the same thing for wild walking. There is no thousand ways of wild walking. You can, of course, wild walk with various styles. You can make various down steps depending on the dances of your context, which are famous in your fashionable in your context. But the technique itself of wild walking is exactly the same now as it was when the shamans were pretending ascending to the sky and they were walking on very narrow things. Of course, before electricity was invented, you could do many things in the night which were purely miraculous, and wild walking was one of these things. Horse riding, ever since horses were domesticated, there is no thousand ways of riding a horse and making acrobatics on the horse. The very, very ancient Chinese documents show people jumping on horses, standing in balance while the horse is riding, somersaulting, and this is perpetuated again and again. Training elephants is the same. You cannot change the training of an elephant. You're better to know how it is done, but it cannot be changed significantly. Of course, instead of having a crock, a hook, you can have a umbrella in front of a hook to placate people who think that elephants should be trained with carrots and pieces of sugar. But you cannot change that. So there is these elements. So it could say that although the various institutions of the circus and the various forms taken in various cultures can be documented historically, although it is very difficult because as a popular art, as a minor art, as a lowbrow art, nobody until the last 2 centuries, nobody has taken care of recording the things. And there has been, of course, efforts when the circus became extremely popular in Victorian times and in France at the end of the 19th and 20th century. It had become fashionable among the artists and so on. Then many people paid attention to the circus and started recording things, but writing books about it. But it's always the same things, the same boring stories. All these artists have the same boring stories. They all tell you that they descend from aristocratic origin. And it's very interesting that their great-great-grandmother was a famous equestrian, and that a very rich banker from Italy or a pope or a monk, I don't know, fell in love with her, and then that was the beginning of a big circus dynasty. You have the implementation of that legend in a fascinating book by Gustave Kahn from a symbolist called Le Cirque Solaire, which is of course predate for a long time, by a long time, Le Cirque du Soleil, which itself, as you know, stole the title from Anna Mouchkine in France, le Théâtre du Soleil. The Théâtre du Soleil was very famous long before Le Cirque du Soleil became what it is. But before Le Cirque du Soleil, there was Le Cirque Solaire by Gustave Kahn, which is a story of aristocrat falling in love and discovering the circus and etc. etc. So you have all these things, but you don't have, you cannot put historians are really powerless in front of the circus because the circus has not been textualized. I mean, I am responsible for, among a few other people, but very few other people, to textualize the circus in a way which tries to construe it as a legitimate object of anthropology, legitimate of ethnology. But it is very hard to put it in a historical perspective. It is oral tradition, and we will come back to that in the conclusion. So let me continue. So the origin of these skills are lost in the deep of time, in the deep time of the earliest cultures, which emerged with human societies and animal domestication. The cultural variants by necessity are superficial. However, even if the circus can be said to have no history, it has nevertheless an archaeological presence inasmuch as its performers have left some material traces in the form of artifacts, iconic representations, and allusion to their art, which are found in the narratives of literate societies, either through their explicit references to popular performances or as recorded echoes of much more ancient oral tradition. Something which is little known is that in the Roman Empire, the circus skills we admire now in contemporary circus were performed in the Roman amphitheater. Elephants were trained, there were some gory spectacles, hunting spectacles, animal fighting, but the great majority was trained animals. And if you remember Androcles lions, the Androcles lions is a very amusing story because you know the story of the slave which is thrown to the lions because he has been punished and is condemned to be devoured by the lions. So he arrives in the ring, and suddenly lions come to him, jump on him, not to hit him but to embrace him. And immediately, as Plinius records the story, immediately they circulate in the amphitheater tablets which explains that this man was lost in Africa. He encounters these lions which had been wounded by a thorn. They couldn't walk, so he took the thorn out of the paws of the poor lions, and so the lions could live. And then, when the poor slave was thrown to the lions recognized him and expressed his gratitude by saving him. Now, if you have any experience with the circus, you recognize, something which is very, very interesting and well staged. Because if you think, well, that has to be prepared. You don't write hundreds of tablets on the spur of the moment. You have to ask why. So it is obviously, that people that, and it is presented as an example of the gratitude and nobility of the lions and so on and so on. That is the story of Androcles. So there are a lot of, you have countless in Latin literature, you have countless references to those who are familiar with poets, martialists, for instance, and so on. There is countless references to exactly what you see in circus now. And even, I think that in Plato, I don't remember where, but Plato compares something to these trainers which on the agora put their arms in the jaws of the lions. Therefore, you had performers with lions which were doing exactly what circus people do, like putting their head in the head of the lions and so on. So these type of things escape the discipline of history because it goes through time It does not leave any traces except as allusions, as I mentioned, and things like that. So what I would like to do now is let me get back to the thread of my. Now, some robust form of symbolic behavior have been transmitted from generation to generation and constitute a kind of archaeological memory, although their meaning does not necessarily remain stable when they are framed in changing context. And the best example I know is the famous horse, which was trained by William Banks, an Englishman from I think the 16th century. And the horse was trained to say yes, no, to recognize someone with glasses, to go and pick up someone with a red scarf, to stand up, to kneel down. And the Inquisition says this is magic, this is a witch. So the man said, no, bring a crucifix. So they brought a crucifix, that took place in Orleans, bring a crucifix. And immediately the horse kneels down in front of the crucifix, so the bishop says, oh, okay, it's a miracle of God. Your horse understands language. Now, a horse, of course, you can make a horse say yes and no. You know, you just train it to scratch a bit, and the horse does that. If you tickle his ears, the horse does that. After a while, you just do that, and the horse does that. You just do that, the horse does that. So you can say, "Do you want to work today?" And the horse says, "No." Okay. Do you want to eat? Oh yes. So you want to eat and not to work? Yes. You see, and so people, and so you can build dialogue like that. Okay. Unfortunately, another bishop in another city was not convinced, and so he has to, at this point, the trainer had to explain how he trains the horse, and he has to give all the explanation. And he said, "Give me a horse, and within 18 months, I will train him to do exactly the same thing." So that was exactly, and because of the visibility by this trial, someone in France, Chevalier de l'Étoile, wrote in his diary the precise description of the complete act, which I have published in my latest book on the circus as multimodal discourse. And we have the complete description in 16th century French, of course. And if you read that and you go to a circus tomorrow, you will see exactly the same act, because it's the same way of training horses, and the same way of framing this automatic behavior within a discourse, which give it a lot of meaning. I want to focus on clowns here, as I have announced, and sorry, I have to provide this sort of general framework for this work. But before moving to the acts, which I want to discuss, which offer a ritualistic use of water and fire as essential part of the performance, I would like to remind you that in Europe, traditionally, at least since the beginning of the 19th century, clans come in pair. Someone calls a white-faced clown, and the other one nicknamed the August, which is a sort of tatterdemalion, slovenly tatterdemalion, a trump, etc. So in the current circus, you have two versions, two paradigms: the solo clown, who can do comic things, make people laugh by his own antics, and the team clown, that here, a white-faced clown and another clown. And I thought that I didn't want to bring, we are in a sort of, I just want to show, I will put that. This is a famous clown team from the 1950s, 60s in France. And you can see the white-faced clown and the team 2 August. So I will show that to Tom, and then I will show it to you. Okay? And I just want to show it to you. So you see that the white-faced clown has a very different costumes, a very different makeup of the other one. The white-faced clown is completely, and the characteristic of the white-faced clown is that his face is completely white. he has some black marking. Each clan has a different marking, but all white-faced clan obeys the same algorithm. And you see that the August have enlarged lips, natural colors, enlarged natural colors, and so on. So, whenever you go to a circus and there are clowns, you will see act by a white face and an August. Sometimes there are two Augusts, but there is never, there cannot be two white faces. You will see one. These characters are all individualized. You recognize one for the other. They have names, but their makeup implement an algorithm which is with various parameters. For instance, the eyebrow can be higher, can be, each one they call that their signature. So there is this algorithm, and one, the white-faced clan, appears as a very sophisticated, beautiful costumes, very refined gestures. He is articulate, he speaks very well, he can sing, and he plays beautifully a lot of instruments. He's an embodiment of civilization, he's an embodiment of the finest things, but emphatically so. He represents the norm, he represents authority, he represents the power of culture. And of course, the other one is the opposite. He has ill-fitted costumes, he is smeared with natural colors, he speaks in not a very nice way. In French, there is a tradition of making the clown speak with an English accent. You know, something like that makes people laugh and so on. So he is not articulate. A lot have been written about this contrast. But what is interesting is that if you look a bit on, I say there is no history, but if you look at the roots of these traditions, it is obvious that the white-faced clan is Arlecchino of the Commedia dell'arte. And you know that Arlecchino is a devilish character. So the hypothesis which I like to do is that the white-faced clan is really the trickster of the tradition of many culture. He is a trickster. And I will show you how he tricks not only his lowly partner, but also the straight man, that is a man who is often the master of ceremony. And I will like to start with an act which involves fire. And when you hear the act, you will remember all what was said yesterday about the various forms of fires, the culture of fire. Okay. The master of ceremony, the ringmaster, is here, and he said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the clan so-and-so. So the white-faced clan arrives, elegant, he works like a dancer and so on. And he said, Monsieur Loyal, what a pleasure to see you. Do you know that I have earned an enormous prize for my sharpshooting? I am a sharpshooter, and he has a beautiful gun, a silver gun. Oh, really? Congratulations. Yes, I'm going to demonstrate my skill. Then take this match, all that match, and I am going to shoot in one single, the flame in one single shot. So, okay, so the ringmaster gets the match like that. And then at a distance, the white face takes his gun and then he aims, and suddenly, shit! He's burned, of course. The straight man has burned himself, because if you wait long enough, the flame comes to say, so the white face, this was a joke. I was teaching a lesson, this was a joke. But we should have done it. What? He said, you can do that to someone else. Okay. Okay, let us do. And then the August arrived. And the ringmaster and the white-faced clan leaves. So the ringmaster says, Monsieur so-and-so, I am going, you know I am a good sharpshooter, I am going to show you that I can shoot, extinguish that match in your fingers in no time. And exactly. Okay, so he does that, and of course, same things continue. Reproduce itself exactly. And the August, it's burned. So the master of ceremony tells him, listen, the white-faced lad is not here, so why don't you do it to him? Yes, good idea. So, and he did, okay. So the white-faced lad says, yes, I am going to, yes, sure. So he takes the match. And then the August, with a gun, goes and he says, wait. But the man does not get burnt. So he waits. He says, is it loaded? No. Oh. And then he looks at the man with a flame. He says, what? Okay, can you? At the end, he said, well, why aren't you burnt? So the white face has a tape. And so he simply pushes, when it burns, his face pushes. Now this is very interesting because you have three forms of fire. You have explosion, you have slow burning, you have burning, and you have slow burning. And the fact that the white-faced cloud, which is the embodiment of sophistication, culture, etc., has a mastery of slow burning and tricks the other ones, which are only dealing with fast burning, regular burning. This manipulation is extremely interesting if you put that together, and if you relate that to possibly, but I don't say possibly, ancient ritual, but certainly ancient tricks and trickster, because it's a typical trickster to teach something at the same time to ridicule the people who are not integrated. We trust the trickster, and the trickster always, and I don't know if that corresponds to your knowledge of the trickster, which there is an abundant literature on the trickster in folk tales, in performance, and so on and so on. So this is, we can elaborate, of course. I don't want to elaborate further on that, because after what we said yesterday about burning and about fire, I think that it's interesting to see that in a setting like that, in a context like this type of manipulation, and the manipulation by the characters which manipulate it. Because slapstick, sometimes you have the impression that slapstick is just a matter of hitting, etc. No, it depends on who hits whom. It depends on who it whom and in which context. It's not because you are slapping someone that you make people laugh. You might make them scared, make them panic. It depends who slaps whom, in which context. So these things are very, very precise, and it's really like a very, very, I would say, subtle mechanics. And clowns know that if there is a mistake, then we fall flat. As I see in the circus, they leave the ring on their belly, rather than acknowledging, the laughter and the applause of the people. Now I want to move to. There is more about fire than that, but this one is very, very, I think, very interesting and very challenging from our point of view. There is with water. Water is abundantly involved in clouds, and there is one in particular which I would like to. Fortunately, in 1920, someone has gone to the circus, was interested in clowns, someone called Tristan Rémy, who was a journalist and a novelist, and he recorded in writing the dialogues of the clowns. Because the comedy of the clowns, what I have said about the match, the fire, it's not written anywhere. It belongs to the oral tradition. And it is imitated from one troupe to another. They tell you, if you ask clowns, where did you get that? Where does that come from? They say, oh, my uncle was doing that, but not so well. Or say, oh, we say, no, my uncle invented it. But if you go further, someone else will tell you, no, 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 it is my grandfather who did it for the first time. It's impossible to pinpoint an origin of this thing. So that's why you can assume that it goes very, very, very fast, mainly when it involves very minimal technology. Of course, you can imagine that the shooting can be done with a halo and not with six. So you don't have to have a gun or to have gun in culture to do that type of act. It can be postponed to other level of technology. The Clan Act now, which I want to mention, is referred to as the honey or the bees, and it's always the same pattern, but implemented in various ways. The Whiteface clan is there and is interacting a bit with the master of ceremony, and here arrives the August, who crosses the ring and says, "Hey, where are you going?" "I'm going away." "Why?" "I don't want to work anymore." "Hey, how are you going to live?" "Oh, I don't know. People will give me things." "Oh, nobody will give you anything. Listen, I have a better idea for you. Let us imitate the bees. You know the bees? The queen bee in hive? The little bees go around, they work, they come, and then the honey." So of course it is completely biologically, it's fantastic. It's an imagination. It's a representation of the honey in the popular imagination. And he said, no, it's very simple. You say, you sit down, you are the queen bee. I transform you into the queen bee, and so he puts a crown on top of the rest of the crown. And then I will be the little bee, and I'm going to float to go and to pick up honey on the flowers, and then I will come to you. I will bow 3 times, and you tell me, "Little bee, give me your honey," and you don't have to work. Okay, good. So it goes, and of course the clans, the Whiteface clan, fills his mouth with water, and then when he comes, the ogre say, "Honey, little bee, give me your honey," and then throw the water on his face. Okay. Now we can discuss, of course, and elaborate on the role of water as a punishment, and being soaked, being walked. And I had that in the draft. I wrote. There is I have some information about the Hindu festival of Holi, Holi, where people splash each other with water. That it is also a time of license. It is a time when you break the rules of caste, you break the rule of genders. So it is a sort of carnivalesque moment in which, for a brief period of time, all the constraints of societies are relaxed and transgressed by everybody. Now, at the same time, there is all this splashing of water, and you can splash water on anybody. That is, that's a problem, because that's a big, splash water is not a nice thing to do, but if you can generalize flash water in the street, you go flash water, you go at Victoria, you meet the president, you throw a pail of water to his face, everybody will laugh, if it is holy. If it is not holy, that is another matter. You might pay dearly for that. So, what happens in the type of these clans is that the clan, of course, August, who have been tricked into being transformed into queen bee, is very cross, is very angry. And the Whiteface tells him, don't worry, you can do that to the not the webmaster, but the ringmaster. You can do that to the ringmaster. Okay, sure. So the ringmaster comes, and the ogre says, Monsieur Ringmaster, listen, I have a very good trick. I have a very good a very good ways, manners, methods for you to live without working. You don't have to work. You can eat as much as you want, and so on. And drink, of course. because there is all now this subtext which emerges in the dialogue, depending on which clowns are performing, because you will never see this act performed twice the same way. By a team clown, yes, with little variations, but when different teams, it is often quite interesting variations, but it's always the same algorithm. So the master of ceremonies, Sidans, is transformed into Queen Bee, and the August start performing the little bee. And of course, he makes a lot of jokes. He says that he's going to collect honey on cabbage, on potatoes. And I say, no. I say, these are vegetables. You have to have flowers. Oh, okay, cauliflowers. Things like that. All these puns and games, because it disorganizes the categorization of the world. He's a transgressor of all these things. Anyway, he goes and he fills his mouth with water, but on the way he laughs so much at the jokes that he spills the water on himself. And that clan always spill waters. When they spill waters, in that case it's always in the front or in the back. They never spill water there or there. They spill water on their parts, as if it was, if they were incontinent, or if they were like babies or senile people who cannot hold their urine, cannot hold their faces. So that is repeated several times, and this August is at the end soaked by himself, because everything, he trips and then he spills the water on himself. The others, Mr. Loyal, the ringmaster, stays there impassible, and at the end, the trickster, the whiteface, gives him discreetly a bottle of water, and the August has the water in his mouth, comes, and the ringmaster stays silent. So the clown says, he spills the water and he says, "You have to give me your honey." And then he receives again the honey from the ringmaster. He receives the water from the ringmaster. So it's quite interesting to see this sequence of successive transgressions, of trying to take the shortcut of living without working, bypassing all the rules of societies, culture, and so on, and being soaked as a result. And we know that punishment by water was practiced again and again until very recently with waterboarding. Because there is, of course, supposedly to know the truth, but it's also a form of punishment and retaliation and things like that. These things can be so. This is very, I would say, very tentative. The only merit I claim for that is to describe with some details through observation, through actual observation of these acts. And I have many descriptions of variants of these things with people, and some documents, also some visual documents. Something that we can raise is what's the meaning of it? Is there any meaning to that? It makes people laugh. Why do they laugh? What do they understand? What is the cognitive dimension of that? Does that make laugh people only if you throw water? No. If I come here and if I throw water on you now, bye-bye, it will be a gesture of aggression. You will think I'm crazy, or you will think that I am violent, or someone asks me a question and say, I don't believe in that. I say, take that. Some people do that. Throwing a glass of water is done in conferences sometimes. Yes. Who was the guy from British Columbia who was prone to fist fighting in conferences? Oh, I forgot his name. Yeah. The Imaginary Canadian. He wrote a book called The Imaginary Canadian. Anyway, some people do that. What I found very interesting is that I describe this behavior, this pattern behavior, traditional behavior, which has been carried from generation to generations, possibly with some changes we have no way of knowing. We can pick through, sometimes we see an allusion to it. I have seen an allusion to the bees in India, the clan in India. I was unable to find out whether it was an imitation of a British act from British circus, or if it was a genuine from India, old comedy from India. It would require, almost, I would say probably 20 lives, which of course in India is possible to have 20 lives. But nevertheless, it's very difficult. Now, the very interesting problem we have to raise in conclusion is that you have a pattern behavior, gestures, with the water and so on, which is replicated from generation to generation to generation, with incredibly various, incredible number of possible meanings. I interpret it as a trickster. I interpret it in view of anthropology, through the anthropological discourse. I know what a psychoanalyst would do. You can see that, Gary, what a psychoanalyst would do. Of course, it's also, it might be, we cannot imagine nothing as a single cause. Nothing as a single cause. No interpretation is bounded by a single set of constraints. And the people who enjoy, the adults and the children, who laugh and enjoy at the bees. And the bees is so successful that actually last year there were at least 6 circus teams which were doing that. 6 circus teams which will do various versions of the bees. I have seen a very bad one, and I have seen a very good one, and I knew that there were other clans doing exactly the same, because it belonged to the repertoire. Now, do the children make the same sense out of it as the parents? Why do everybody seems to respond to that? Does it address very old, a sort of like some people were thinking of tacit cultures, or I don't want to go, but what is interesting is that, and it's a bit like in language. You can have a word, even very net word, no problem, but from a generation to another generation, it doesn't have the same meaning. Best example, one of the examples I know particularly well is cœur, heart, or cœur in 17th century French. It means courage. It means be strong. But now it means feeling. So if someone says, "Do you have heart? Do you have cœur?" For instance, in a play, in classical play, the father asks his son, "As-tu du cœur? Do you have heart?" And you can think that in modern French, that are you good? Are you compassionate? No, it means, are you ready to fight? Are you not going to chicken out? That's what it means. So exactly the same articulation, exactly the same, and is endowed with various meanings. To which extent these meanings seep into each other? To which extent in a population? It's a very challenging problem to, sometimes when I read a cognitive scientist, a cognitive or cognitive semiotician, I have the impression that they have a sort of frozen representation of the semantic structure or semantic cognitive structure. The case of this class who continues today in the age of the big data to entertain an audience with fire and water, although we hardly have any contact with fire, and water is what? Flood, things like that. So I just leave that open. I just wanted to present these two, briefly, these two items, ethnographic items, that what clouds do with fire and what they do with water. They do other things, of course. They do other things. It's not the only thing, the only treatment of fire and water they do. So that's why my small and modest contribution to the fire, the earth, fire and water, which we have discussed from the beginning of this. Thank you.
Okay, time for some questions.
Well, I just wanted to get draw your attention to a detail, an historical detail that you might find interesting, and I haven't been able to follow it up myself. And it concerns the costumes of the Harlequin costume,
Yes.
the way it is represented iconographically. And there's a work written by the Swedish historian of religions, Leo Widinge, on the Harlequin costume and its historical roots. And he wanted to trace it far back in history and find some connection to Central Asia and the beggar monks, and the way the Buddhist beggar monks, and the way their dresses consisted of, were originally made out of
Pieces.
pieces of
Yes. Of bright.
so they weren't made of one piece, and he has been able to trace some interesting links between the costume of Harlequin and these beggar monks, which I mean might be of some
Yes,
interest
I'd
for
be
you.
interested to have this reference because I have no time here to address that, but Harlequin is devil in European folklore. Harlequin is a devil. It is a devil, and the devil is a trickster.
Yeah.
The devil is a trickster.
Yeah. So it's in a way of, I mean, it's interesting because it means that this is a detail that suggests some kind of interaction or conflict between two religious traditions, and
Yes.
the inclusion of a foreign element into a Western tradition.
Well, you see, when we talk of Western tradition, Eastern tradition, I always tend to laugh because
Yeah.
where is a border? What is a border? I mean, there is no solution of continuity.
No, that's
Many of these circus artists come from India.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also
sure,
come
sure.
from India.
But I was meaning if we go
Yeah.
back to antiquity, there is a time and a place where Greek culture interacts with Indian culture in Central Asia. So they were actually
Yes. But this is politically, that politically. But on the popular level,
Sure.
you know, all these troops in Roman Empire, even in this literary text I was mentioning of the classical period, the elephant trainer are referred to Indicos, were Indians.
Yeah.
You know, performers were Indians. They come, you know, all the Roms, you know, in European circuses, most circus families are either Jewish or Rom. People who were traveling, who were, you know, displacing, who were couldn't do anything else actually, and were persecuted. I mean, the Nazi persecuted the Roms as much as the Jews. You see. So they were actually. So there is no, you know, it's very challenging to try to retrace the costume of Harlequin.
Yeah,
And
but
the
you
costume
have
of
to
the white faced lad, because from generation to generation there is an improvement, an addition. Each
No,
one,
you have to look it up because I
Yeah.
myself had the time to read it. But I think it's
I have a picture of a clan of the 1930s, 1920s, whose costume, a white-faced clan, whose costume was drawn by Delaunay. You know, the painter with square things. You know, so there has been this type of.
Paul, do you think the vehicle that delivers the water transforms it in some manner? It's humorous when it's delivered by someone's mouth, but it's also very amusing when it's delivered by a seltzer bottle or a bucket.
Oh yes, of
And
course.
all of
course,
these
of course.
differentiate the qualities of the humor that is
Yes,
also
yes,
extracted
yes,
or
yes,
becomes
yes.
something
Another act which is performed, there is one Portuguese team
Yeah.
of three clans, and it's the only act they perform, and it's the same type of things. The whiteface say, oh, you are going to, you know, the clans wants to live and doesn't want to work. They say, oh, I'm going to, again, I give you free drink and free food if you play that game with me. So take a funnel like that, and then I'm going to throw a pen, and if I succeed, then you get sick. And in the meantime, someone comes from the back and to put water in the funnel, because the funnel is supposed to be done like that. So these clans, they have shortened, and it's only water. And so they come again and again with buckets of water and they trip. And of course the Whiteface clan, which is supposed to be the one, is never soaked. And they soak themselves.
Yes.
But they have huge bucket of water. And you cannot do that. You cannot do that in a circus ring when you have sawdust and dust because well, you put too much water.
Yeah.
But in the Blackpool Circus, whose ring can be transformed into a water piece, where they have fountains at the end of the act, etc. So Charlie Caroli was playing. Many of his acts were absolutely soaked in water. It was absolutely, and he was using that in the same and always the same type of algorithm which is applied to that.
Yeah.
So it's a recurring thing.
This is again, the funnel is a humorous prop in a way. As funny as a bucket, or depending on the context in which it's presented.
Oh, I have for my new book. I have documented some props, and I can give you an example of two props. One prop is a bucket which has been transformed,
Yes.
and so you throw what? You throw confettis. You throw confettis, and
That's right.
and then you can throw confettis, and then at the point the clans throw confettis, and the Whiteface said, "Well, you should throw confettis to people like that. It's not polar. It's only confettis." And so he said, "Well, what would you say if I do that to you?" "Oh, go ahead." So he takes the bucket, and then whoosh, and it's water.
Yeah.
You know, the water is in a double container, things like that. Or he has also
But there seems to be an objection to the strange liquidity of the
Of course.
the paper.
But dry liquidity.
Dry liquidity.
dry
precisely.
liquidity. Yes, dry liquidity. And you know the use of confetti in weddings and
Yeah.
things like that. It's interesting. It is, I would say, it's probably a water which does not make you wet.
That's right. And that's
And it
something
is
that-
colored. It is colored like in that Holi festival in India. Charlie Caroli had built this last example I want to give of a prop. He had built an interesting prop, which was like that. Like that. So Charlie Caroli, they are doing their act, and then a troublemaker arrives, the clan, they say, "Oh, I want to," and he tries to market something. He brings, first of all, a special bag, and then says, "We don't want that." And they say, "Oh, I have a portable shower. Portable shower, wherever you go, you do that, you press it, it goes this way, and then you press that, and then you can have a shower. So wherever you are, you don't have, you go, oh, you have a shower, and you do that yourself." And so it's nice. And then he comes like, "Yeah, no. Alors Charlie Caroli tells you, you have a shower. Oh, that's interesting. So you turn that and the water starts. Yes. And how do you stay in that? So the guy is like that. So Charlie Caroli winked to the audience and he turned it. But it is done so that it goes to him.
Yeah.
It water in. And not the guy who is under, because that is under pressure, there is water under pressure. And so the jet goes to the one which wanted to play the trick to this one. Because Charlie Caroli is the victim of the victim of the trickster. So there is a lot, and I have dozens of this type of things. Okay, well, we have another talk, so we should move. Mr. Chairman.